Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bart from GiantScaleNews.com, and this is the first of what will be a series of videos especially tailored for new builders, new flyers, especially people that are going to be new to giant scale RC flying. So this video is going to be about the tools, some of the equipment that you need when you're getting started building planes, whether you're assembling an ARF or building from a kit. These are just some of the basic tools you're going to need to have in your shop that you'll need to have available for when you start the process of putting something together. It's not meant to be an end-all be-all list, and certainly when this video is posted at the website, I encourage everyone to discuss what their favorite tools are, which tools they have that are especially important, that they use all the time. And I've put together a list of some of the things that you need to be able to do. I'm also going to start my timer. I've tried to make this video in under 10 minutes for about 2 weeks now, and it ain't happening. So I'm just going to relax. We're going to talk about this stuff. It might go 15, 16 minutes, but hopefully we'll cover everything, and at the end of it, you'll be pretty confident when you're getting started that you have what you need, or at least most of it. Okay, so the things you need to be able to do when you're building an RC plane. You need to be able to research stuff. You need to be able to measure stuff. You need to be able to clamp and secure stuff. You need to be able to cut stuff, glue stuff, cover stuff, and then you also need to be able to install and fasten stuff. Once all that's done, the plane's basically done. You'll put the radio in as part of that. You will set up the engine, and then there'll be some test flying. So the first thing on the list is the ability to research stuff. If you're watching this video, chances are you have an internet connection, you know how to use Google or Bing, you know, any of the search engines. It's very important when you're getting started that you recognize the possibility that at some point you're going to be stuck. Whether you're out at the field flying and something's not working right, you're about to glue on some important part of the plane and you're just not sure, you need to be able to stop yourself, go to the internet, go to the local hobby shop, maybe go to somebody in your flying club and say, what am I doing wrong, or is this right the way I'm doing it? You need to be able to stop and just make sure. So being able to research, having resources available while you're doing your project, it's important. Now, when you actually get ready to build, you need to be able to measure stuff. It could be a matter of just having a tape measure on hand. Usually a tape measure is great for when you're setting up the airplane. Also, having rulers. At the very least, I would say a 2-foot straight edge like this. You can pick these up. Most of the department stores, you might have a craft store nearby. Any of the big box craft stores would have something like this. Even the big home centers have straight edges in the tool aisle. But at least 2 feet. You could also have smaller ones on hand. You know, the tape measure comes in handy for measuring things, but being able to draw straight lines, being able to cut straight lines, it's important when you're building RC planes. Now, the 2-foot straight edge is going to work great all the way up to, you know, your quarter scale stuff. When you start getting into very big aircraft, especially if you're building, you're going to need something bigger. And this is a 6-foot straight edge. This is going to come in handy when you're laying out your plans. You put this down on top of it to make sure your plans are down on your building board nice and straight. Also, if you just finished building your fuselage, the first time you unpin it from your workbench or you unclamp it from your workbench, you can lay this down over the top of it to make sure everything's nice and straight. Maybe you can check the trailing edge of the wing, make sure that's straight when it's all hinged. So that's going to come in handy in a lot of different cases, but when you're getting started, 2-foot straight edge, tape measure, that'll get you going. Clamping and securing stuff. Now, sometimes I use masking tape. I like the blue stuff because it comes right off without lifting the covering. It also doesn't lift up the fibers of the wood very much. Different kinds of spring clamps. I don't know where I got these. These are like hobby grade, flimsy metal, but they work. These you get in the tool aisle, big box stores. But spring clamps, even zip ties at different times during the build, you're going to need those. So being able to clamp and secure stuff is important, especially when you're attaching things, when you're waiting on glue to dry. Things need to be attached, clamped, secure, in place while the glue dries so that you can walk away. You don't sit there holding it for 20 minutes waiting for your epoxy to set up or something. Very important in building. These are called T-pins. Okay, I don't think you can find a builder's shop anywhere without a box of these. It's just a pin with a T-top, so you can push them in and pull them out very easily. Great for holding stuff down, holding stuff together. You could also use small, these are called quick clamps. Okay, they're not very expensive, you can use those. So having the ability to clamp things together, hold things down, that all comes into play during the building process or when you're assembling, say, an ARF. Next is the ability to cut stuff. Most common in shops all around the world, I'm sure, there's got to be a gazillion of these things out there. The X-Acto knife. It's a simple aluminum holder for a very sharp blade. They come in two different sizes. This is the larger one, so it has a slightly larger blade. They make a lot of varieties of blades and stuff that you could stick in these handles. So this is like a pinhole saw for cutting shapes and stuff. That's your standard number 11 blade. You want to have, at the very least when you get started, and as far as clamping and securing stuff goes, at the very least when you're getting started, some masking tape, a small package of T-pins. You can get these at like a Michael's craft store. At the very least you would want that kind of thing, but it depends, every airplane's different. So as far as clamping and securing, you're going to have to just kind of see what you need as you go, but don't go crazy buying a ton of stuff. Now getting back to cutting stuff, at the very least an X-Acto knife, the standard size, and a package of blades. That'll get you started. When you go to the hobby shop to pick up your X-Acto knife, you're going to see these red handles that X-Acto also makes, and these are good for holding saw blades. So these little hobby saws come in all different sizes. They have fine tooth, coarse tooth, depending on what you're planning on cutting. So very inexpensive. You can get a variety of these for not a lot of money. But getting started, at the very least, maybe this handle with this blade and a standard X-Acto knife handle with a supply of blades. That'll get you through most all of your basic builds. Sometimes you might decide to buy a used airplane, and in installing your own radio or your own fuel tank, you might have to take out some stuff that somebody else put inside. I use one of these. It's a Japanese style pull saw. The blade is flexible, so I can stick it down into the fuselage, press it up against the side of the fuselage, and then cut out the old stuff that's inside of there. But you don't need this if you're just getting started. It's just something I mentioned that I have. Alright, so cutting stuff, getting started, the basics, the knife with the blades, and the red handle with a couple of saw blades. That'll get you going. After you've mastered cutting stuff, next you need to think about how you're going to glue things together. So gluing stuff, the options are these clear glues. They're called CA glues. You could get them online, you can get them at the local hobby shop. There's different versions, different thickness of the glue. The very thin stuff, you actually hold the wood together and then run the glue along the seam, and it wicks down into the joint and it locks it together. Thicker stuff you put on first and then you push the pieces together. And there's something that I don't have here, it's called kicker. And so what you would do is you would put the glue, you'd stick the pieces together, and then you spray where the glue joint is, and it makes the glue dry rock hard almost instantly. Also glues fingers, pants, all sorts of things to all sorts of other things. So be careful with these. They're both very potent types of glue. They don't work as well when you're trying to join plywood together, and they don't work well if you have like a piece of wood and you're trying to just stick it onto another piece of wood. The end grain doesn't glue very well with CA glue. So plywood and end grain don't do very well with CA. But when it comes to different materials, you also have other kinds of glues. So you have what's called 5-minute epoxy. You mix half of this and half of this together, you stir it up real well, and then you smear it on your parts, you glue them together, and it makes a really, really strong bond, especially where you need extra strength. It's recommended, it's probably going to be in the instructions for your kit or for your ARF when they really recommend you to use epoxies. When you're gluing with epoxy, it's good to keep in mind, you put the glue in the joint, you clamp it together. You might be tempted to go grab a spring clamp. You say, oh, Bart said use spring clamps. So you put this on there, and it's too much pressure, so it squeezes out all of the glue. It brings the parts together too tightly, squeezes out all the glue, and that makes for a weak joint. So just keep in mind when you're using epoxy, you need to have a a film of glue in between the parts in order to make the bond really strong. So don't over clamp it. Another glue, lots of builders are using regular wood glues. I think these are called aliphatic resins. I might be wrong. I've used this to fix all sorts of things, furniture, a guitar, you know, doing all kinds of woodworking projects. So this is a totally legitimate glue for a lot of the things you're going to do. Again, if you're ever unsure what to use, what do? You stop, you go back to number one on the list, which is research stuff. And while you're researching stuff, you're asking questions, you're learning, and you're finding out, well, maybe Titebond isn't the best glue for a situation. Maybe you need a longer setting epoxy glue. So while this stuff sets in 5 minutes, there's other epoxies you can buy, available at most of the home centers, that will set up more slowly. The slower setup epoxies actually are a little bit stronger. All of the epoxies, for the most part, are strong enough for what we're doing with our airplanes. But if you want to have a little more time to put the parts together, a little more time to lay out the glue precisely, you know, maybe brush it or squeegee it into place without it setting up while you're doing your preparation, you want a longer setting glue. So that's an option for you that's out there. Also, another couple more kinds of glues real quick while we're talking and while we're slowing things down here. This is called canopy glue. It goes on, it doesn't make a lot of fumes, so it doesn't smoke the clear plastic of your canopy. You can see it up here. You use it around the edge to put your canopy in place. It sets up nice and clear, it remains soft, so it holds the plastic real well. And then if you're starting out with foamies, you might decide to get a better one. You might decide you want to, don't want to block our picture there on the wall actually, now that I look. Anyway, if you're starting out with a foamy, something you can just take to the park, welder's glue is very, very, very popular. Be careful though, different kinds of foam. When you're starting out, different kinds of foam require different kinds of glue. There's EPO foam, there's, I'm drawing a blank now. There's different kinds of foam. Make sure you're using the right glue. Oops. Welder's glue is a very popular one. You could actually buy this locally at AutoZone. Not AutoZone, Advance Auto. They carry it. Okay, the next topic on the list is cover stuff. After we've built the airplane, after it's been assembled, you're going to need to be able to go over the covering. You might be starting from scratch with a kit and you need to cover it in its entirety. So you're going to need to know how to put on the most common form of covering for RC planes, which is the heat shrink material. Over the years, there's been a number of different brands that have come out. This is a roll of Monocoat, and what you do with this is you put it over your structure, you use an iron that heats it up, and that activates the adhesive that's on one side, and then it also causes this plastic material to shrink a little bit. So you put it over your structure, you iron it on, it ends up being nice and tight, creates a nice glossy finish. That would take a lot more effort if you tried to do this with paint and silk or cotton or whatever you're going to cover it with. So Monocoat saves a lot of time. It's a great finish. The problem with it is it can wrinkle over time. It can loosen up a little bit. You'll get wrinkles. So whether it's a brand new ARF, whether you're putting together an airplane that you bought used from somebody, or if you're building a plane from scratch, you're going to need to have an iron to put down the covering material. This is a monocoating iron. Monocoat is a top flight product now owned by Hobbyco, and I've probably had this since I was a kid. This is what's called a trim tool. It has a smaller iron surface. You can get it into tighter corners and get your material down nice and smooth. There's different forms of these. This one is from 21st Century Fabric or Cover-Right, which is kind of a fabric feeling covering material. It's not glossy and smooth like Monocoat is, but these are just two other irons. It's an iron, the trim tool, okay? If you're just starting out, one regular iron from any one of the companies really is going to get you to the finish line, okay? It's good to have the fabric cover over it. They call it a, I don't know, they probably call it a covering sock or something, I don't know. But all that does is it keeps the surface of the iron from scratching the covering. And usually if you're going to buy an ARF, depending on the ARF that you select, how long it's been sitting in the warehouse, how long you let it sit in the box before you started working on it, This fabric material, or this covering material, can come loose. It can get little bubbles and stuff in it. So all you need to do before you take the airplane out to the field, turn your iron on, get it nice and warm, and you're better off starting out on the colder side. You don't want to just crank it all the way up at first. But you just go over the different parts, iron out the bubbles and stuff, and get it all nice and smooth before you go flying. So at the very least, to be able to cover stuff, get yourself one regular size iron, get the cotton sock that goes over the top of it, and you should be ready to go. Now, next comes the process of installing and fastening stuff. A lot of the fasteners in RC planes are what are called socket head bolts or socket head screws, which means you're going to need some Allen head or Allen wrenches. I have these in both metric and SAE, a variety of sizes to handle the variety of screws that you're going to come across. Usually the bolts to hold the motor on could be 4mm or 5mm, so you need some Allen wrenches in metric sizes for those. A lot of the stuff that you get with the plane might be 440 or 632, so those you would need SAE for. Don't be surprised that you have this mismatch of SAE and metric inside your airplane. Other basic hand tools that you might need: a pair of snips just for cutting quick ties and wires and stuff, you know, slotted and Phillips screwdriver, a pair of pliers, a pair of needle nose pliers. Just basic hand tools are going to come in handy. You might need a small drill. Don't go out and buy the most expensive one that you could find. Just a regular light duty cordless drill will work great in the shop. It'll last you forever. You'll never wear it out working on RC planes. So at the bare minimum, when it comes to tools, get yourself the Allen wrenches that you're going to need. Sometimes people buy the Allen wrenches that come with a handle. They're called Allen drivers. Okay, they come in handy. Also, having the little ball end is helpful because it lets you get into the Allen head socket from an angle and turn it from an angle, whereas the ones that just have a straight end, you can't really do that. Okay, so those are the basic things. We're going to go into radio installation in a later video. We're also going to go into engine setup and what you need to know about your gas engines, your two-stroke glow engines, four-stroke glow, even electric motors. We'll cover that stuff in other videos. Test flying also we'll cover in later videos. The next video, though, we're going to take a look at this airplane. This is an old Linear 73-inch Edge 540. We've got a Zenoa G26 to put in it. And we're going to talk about getting started in putting together giant scale planes, especially, you know, I have a thing for trying not to spend a lot of money on this stuff. So I'm going to talk about how to do giant scale RC on a budget. Now this airplane, I got it from a friend of mine. I sold it to him. He sold it back to me. I forgot that I crunched the rudder on the last flight right before I sold it. And so when I got it back, I was surprised to find that the fin has to be rebuilt. So this is the fin. This is the rudder. The rudder mounts to the fin, right? And that's the vertical stabilizer on the plane. So I have to rebuild this. I have just enough parts, and this thing is holding together just well enough that I can get all the measurements and make the pieces I need. So that's going to be the next video. We're going to get this plane flying, and the next installment of this video series, we're going to rebuild this fin so we can put it back on that airplane, and then we're going to go through all the steps to get it flying. It's going to be fun. It's a great flying airplane. It does great with a G26. G26 is a great engine for your 30cc size planes. You can buy these all day long in the classifieds on the internet used, and usually they're in great shape. So we'll talk about all that stuff. So for now, thanks for watching. 20 minutes. It's a long video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, post them in the thread where the video is, and we'll try to get all your questions answered. Thanks again for watching. Bart from Giant Scale News.